So, this is a time of year when we get to see a lot of talk about virtue signaling on social media. We just saw some throughout the month of June, because June is Pride Month. And we're going to see more because Portland Pride is coming up. And often when progressives talk about things that they believe in, they are accused of virtue signaling. This doesn't tend to happen the other way. I rarely hear conservative causes and those who claim them as virtue signaling. But I think that's unfair. Because the truth is, whenever we're speaking up about things that we care about, we're signaling virtues. And today's passage has a lot to deal with when it comes to virtue signaling. So I'm wearing my most virtue signaling of shirts. For those who can't read it, it says, "This pastor loves you," and it shows a unity flag. In the past, this shirt has been reserved for the Pride Parade alone, because I felt like this is a little pandery. You know, it's a little... I mean, the rest of us don't wear shirts saying, "Hey, this firefighter loves you," or "This accountant loves you." But it felt important on the 4th of July, so I wore it then. Now, I think the reason why virtue signaling gets used as kind of this pejorative term is because there's this inferred association with insincerity. Hey, you guys are just hopping on a bandwagon. And I do see this. I don't see it for those of us who are writing our pronouns on our name tag. Not usually. Although if you were to listen to some talk radio, you're certainly going to hear that. Oh, look at those virtue signaling progressives who list their pronouns on here. Well, the virtue I think we're signaling here is all are welcome. We care about you. We love you. We're going to trust that you know who you are. And at the very least, I don't need to be the expert on who you are. So you tell me your pronouns, and I will respect those, because I care about you. Pretty basic. People tend to respect my pronouns. But we do see this a lot with corporations. 2 years ago, you can go into just about any Target, and you're going to find so much Pride swag in the month of June, right? Where are those now? June 1st, you walk into any Target, and it looks like a Walmart. Americana swag everywhere. Where was the Americana swag 2 years ago? Did they not care about that then? Were they not patriotic 2 years ago, but they're patriotic now? See, they've switched in the virtue they want to signal. 10 years ago, I worked at Capital One, and we were so proud to be sponsors of Portland Pride. So many of my coworkers were excited to have a booth there representing the company. There is no Capital One booth this year. There is no sponsorship of Portland Pride this year. But they were sure proud 10 years ago. And that kind of virtue signaling, you know what? I think we should remember that. I think we should call that out. Just like the churches that claimed that Black Lives Matter 5 years ago, but are pretty quiet right now, right? Which brings us to this story. After the powerful religious leaders, the Sadducees, told the early church, the apostles, "Hey, we don't really want you talking about Jesus anymore," the church met together, they gathered together, and they prayed for boldness. And we see that a consequence of that boldness that they prayed for, that they were seeking and pursuing, is that the church continues to do one of the most audacious things they could possibly do. A thing so outrageous it would get us in trouble. They continue to sell their possessions to create a pool of resources for one another. This is pretty wild stuff. It is a result of their prayer for boldness, and one of them rises to the surface in this book. His name is Joseph, but none of us call him Joseph because the apostles renamed him Barnabas. Barnabas means son of encouragement. This guy sold his possessions just like a lot of other unnamed people, and he's just so darn encouraging, the apostles change his name. You know what? We're not going to call you your birth name anymore. You're now Barnabas. And he was like, all right. And we meet him throughout this book. We see him in other places too. He becomes a companion of Paul later. But right now, he's one of many folks who sold what they have for the benefit of others. And by virtue of being named and included here, somebody that we can look to and latch on to, the writer is making a point. The point is, be like Barnabas. And to emphasize this point, we get a counterexample to not follow. It is one of the most wild stories in the book of Acts. One of the most wild stories in the whole New Testament. The story of Ananias and Sapphira. It is not one of my favorites, but I think put in context, it makes a point that we ought to appreciate. So in this story, Ananias and Sapphira, they sell everything they've got. So far, so good. And they choose to donate a huge sum of it to the church so that anybody who has need is taken care of. This also sounds pretty great. They hold back some of the money for themselves. Okay. But they decide that they're not going to tell anybody they're doing this. They want everybody to know, hey, we sold everything we've got, and we've given you everything we've got. And they go to Peter, and they're like, hey, we've given you everything we've got. And Peter says, oh, how could you have done this awful, terrible thing? You've lied, not to us, but to the Holy Spirit. You've lied to God, God's Spirit. And they are smited, dead. Can you imagine making an offering? But because you fudged it a little bit, God just, boom, and you die? This is awful. We're told that one of the consequences of this is the early church is filled with fear. Yeah, of course. Absolutely. I'd be filled with fear. I don't believe that God operates this way. I believe that God is unending in God's graciousness. We make many mistakes in life. Some of them happen to be deceitful ones. But if God smited everybody who lies to God, our churches would be graveyards. How many folks have praised God? God, I give you my heart. I'm going to give you all that I am to you. And then they just go on being just as greedy as they ever were. Right? Saw a group of politicians who were huddling around for a prayer. God, may your will be done. May this awful, awful bill pass with this new budget. Boom! Smited. No, that's not what happens. And, hear me out, though. I've been there before, too. One of the things we see in the book of Acts is that people change. I've changed. We can change. And this is a big reason why I don't believe that God just smites us, because I think at God's heart of hearts, as the God of love, God desires that people convert not just to God, but to one another. And this is one of the points that I think our writer is trying to make. This wasn't just giving to the church. This wasn't so that the church can build another new church. They didn't have buildings at this point. They met in each other's homes, which is something I'd like to point out. Our passage says everybody who has property sold it, okay? And yet they're meeting in homes. So whose homes are they meeting in? Surely this is a little bit of an overstatement. But the virtue, the value that our writer wants us to have is that we share what we've got, not to look generous, not to look like we're pious people, like we give a darn about our neighbors, but because we actually do care. It's not about appearances. It's not about appearances. If it's about appearances, that's gonna kill us. And I mean that in a way. Our writer is writing to a very small group of people. They're not even called Christians regularly yet at this point in the life of Christianity. They're called followers of the way. They're still at the beginning stages of differentiating themselves from Judaism. They're beginning to become more diverse when this book is written. They're still meeting in homes. They're still sharing what they've got with each other. And if they start caring about appearances and false piety more than they do one another, the teachings of Jesus are going to fade into obscurity. The way will disappear. And I think our writer knows that. Yeah, he's dabbling in a fear tactic here, and I wish he didn't do that. Hey, you care about each other. Don't you lie about it, because you will be smited. All right, Luke X. Can you make that point without, people dying? But I think we're seeing the death of Christianity of a sorts in our country when people engage in the prioritization of piety, false piety, over their actual concern for people. We do that when we value institutions over the people who make up those institutions, when we value us over them. When we say, those people over there, whoever I want those people to be, God does not care about them. God wants them to be hurt so that we can be well. You don't find that in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. You don't find that in the New Testament teachings, except for Revelation, which is a book I've got a bone to pick with. But the heft of the New Testament witness is we love God and we love our neighbors as we love ourselves. If we're just loving ourselves, we've missed the whole point. The whole point. And while our Christian institutions may continue on, the way of Jesus and his teachings will fade into obscurity. So, I hope that as we go out about our lives this summer, as we go to church, go to Pride, go about our daily lives, if we go to protests or we write letters, whatever. I hope we do these things not out of signaling virtue alone, hoping to appear a certain way, but because we actually care about this mission that Jesus has spent his teachings doing, imparting to us, of loving God and loving your neighbor as you love yourself. We don't just signal that we care about other people, but we live like we love other people. Okay? Now, to those of us who are like, yeah, but I make mistakes. I fall down. I seek to love people, but sometimes I hurt them instead. I don't want you to worry that God is going to smite you. I want you to know that grace is new every morning. Later on in this book, we'll see Barnabas makes a bad mistake. At least the writer wants us to think it's a mistake. And yet we're still pointed to Barnabas as an example worth pursuing. And that I want to hold on to. I seek to be a child of encouragement. I hope that we can pursue not just being a church of Barnabases, but Barnabases in our everyday life beyond these buildings that we call churches. Because that is where the way of Jesus gets real. As we live out loving others as we encounter them.